Welcome to Nebraska Farmcast, a production of the Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I'm Ryan Evans. On November 4th, 2021, the Center for Ag Profitability held a webinar in our weekly series looking at the impact of price and management on culling decisions for cattle producers. In this episode of Nebraska Farmcast, we have a recap of what was discussed during this webinar, and we'll start it off here with the webinar's moderator and one of the presenters, Dr. Elliott Dennis, an assistant professor of livestock marketing and animal health in the Department of Agricultural Economics here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln.
We recently held a webinar as part of the Center for Agricultural Profitability's weekly webinar series, and in that webinar we discussed price trends in cull cows and the impact of exports and domestic meat consumption on prices, as well as talking about cull or post-pregnancy decisions and potential feed resources requirements if we're choosing to retain those. Myself, Elliott Dennis, Assistant Professor of Livestock Extension Economist in the Department of Agricultural Economics at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, as well as Casey McCarthy, Assistant Professor and Beef Cow Specialist, and Karla Wilke, Associate Professor and Range Management Specialist, hosted that webinar. Karla, maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the post or pregnancy decisions and culling decisions that Casey had presented, and kind of what were some of those decisions briefly that producers should be aware of.
So some of the things that Casey pointed out were that pregnancy determination is a very helpful tool to use to help you decide who you're going to cull and when. And doing early pregnancy detection can be very useful because you can either then make feeding decisions, selling decisions, or rebreeding decisions on those cows rather quickly. And then she also discussed in her slides that rather than just one time a year at the end of the year when we do pregnancy check, that there are a lot of times throughout the production cycle that we can evaluate cows to decide if maybe she's going to be a cull. And that can be everything from birth to weaning to the first round of calving to looking at her records and seeing that her last three calves were all weaned kind of in the bottom 10% of your group. And so maybe she's not a good candidate for your herd, and tightening up calving windows, just things like that can also be times that we make decisions on who's going to be a cull. And then that allows us to make a better plan for feeding them or when we're going to actually sell them, that sort of thing.
And I went and talked a little bit about if we're thinking about making a culling decision and we've decided what actually happens to those cows and what prices will we actually expect to receive. And what I did is I pulled a whole bunch of USDA data that's provided free to the public and showed different pricing trends, and recognizing that the reason why there is a price paid for cull cows is because consumers eat ground beef, and they enjoy eating ground beef and hamburgers and different types of product or meals. And recognizing that ground beef and those small merchandisable steaks that potentially go to Applebee's really comes from four groups of animals. We have the beef cows, the dairy cows, just the trimmings from the steer and heifer market, and also imports. But specifically, I was focusing on the different types of beef cows that will come to market. And really there's four grades that we talk about: the breaker, boner, cutter, and canner market. And really what this is those grades are breaking down by the percent of the dressing percentage that animal will have, as well as the percentage lean that is going to come off the carcass. And really just the rule of thumb is if it's going to dress at a higher percentage and there's going to be less lean on that percentage lean on that product or on that cow, really that results in a higher value carcass. And recognizing that when packers are really purchasing cows, really what they're looking at is what is the aggregate value of that animal. And that value is going to come from the lean market, and it's also going to come from different merchandisable cuts. And so we showed a little bit of how that cutout value for these cull cows have been performing over time, as well as some of those regional price dynamics and how just the seasonality of the market really plays into carrying those animals. And that was just a really nice segue to what you were talking about, Karla, about, okay, now we're sitting in the fall, we're recognizing that price is going to come down. Now we really have to make a decision if we're going to feed those animals. Maybe you can talk a little bit of just briefly about what were some of those decisions that if we're trying to put on weight, maybe bring them up from a cutter to a boner cow, what type of decisions and what type of information do producers need to be calculating in order to make an informed decision?
So I just talked a little bit about some example diets that one might use, whether that was just using some protein supplement on some corn stalk residue grazing or using cover crops that were either planted, annual forages that were either planted maybe after corn silage harvest or were planted in a rotation to be an annual forage available for cows, or looking at a total mixed ration. And some of the costs of those options, and especially given a year when maybe we have had a lot of rain and feed prices are relatively low versus this year, we're the second year of a drought and feed prices have been high. And so kind of comparing whether actually putting that feed into that cow netted you very much. We might have gotten her a little better condition and we might have bumped her up a grade, but the feed that we put into her might or might not have paid off in how we need to do the math on that to determine whether we really think that's going to be a best use of our feed resources. And then we talked a little bit about the difference between the grinder cow market and the white fat market, and that's a different diet and it's much more expensive, and that you aren't going to get that premium for a white fat cow by going back through the sale barn with her. And so making sure that we know what value that we're going to be able to get out of that cow for the feed that we put into it, and being careful about that because cows can eat a lot of feed. And so we just want to make sure that we've done the math on our diet options and know where we are on our marketing options for those cows.
Yeah, a lot of decisions to be made regarding cull cow decision, as you mentioned. It's not a decision without financial repercussions. We know that about 20% of all gross revenue from cow-calf operation is going to come from selling cull cows. And so making both an informed decision on whether we're going to cull certain animals, the time we're actually going to sell these animals, and if we're trying to target a different market, how much feed we should be putting into them can make a big impact on whether that is returning profit back to the operation or not. Thanks for joining me, Karla and Casey. And we will be providing all the slides that we presented, as well as an accompanying 2-page article on cap.unl.edu for the recording of the webinar.
Nebraska Farmcast is a production of the Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. For the latest research-based information and education resources to manage your farm or ranch operation, visit our website at cap.unl.edu. That's cap.unl.edu.